So in states where marijuana has been legalized for recreational use, laboratory testing is generally mandated. So starting in California, starting January 2018, laboratory testing will be mandated. And I know that in California, it's called the Department of Pesticide Regulation. I know they've made a statement that the regulatory body for cannabis is implementing regulations when it comes to testing for pesticides and fungicides and coming up with a list of what's allowed and what's not allowed sort of thing. I know Oregon is doing the same thing. So it's more of a work in progress than anything else. Really, the way to protect yourself is to make sure it's laboratory tested.
The Vidal Speaks podcast.
Episode 93, Dr. Rachna Patel on medical marijuana. Welcome to Vidal Speaks. My name is Deborah Vidal, former 11-year LPGA golf pro turned classical homeopath, certified plant-based nutritionist, and wellness coach. Each week here on Vidal Speaks, we bring you knowledge, inspiration, or natural remedies to help you take charge of your health and feel your best. I believe health is freedom and knowledge is power, so tuning in each week will give you the power to take steps towards freeing yourself from the chains that hold you back from having the energy to do all you want in life. No matter where you are in your journey of wellness, Vidal Speaks can help. I promise. Hey everyone, welcome back to Vidal Speaks Wednesday. I hope you're having a great day. If those of you that are listening in California, I know it's not that much of a great day because of all the disasters we've had here with the fires. It's a catastrophe. And guess what? My poor cousin Anne, who's like my sister and lives in Santa Rosa, is still out of her house and in a shelter. So I'm sending my love to Anna Mamoro. But thankfully, at least their house was saved and it was not one of the burned ones. I feel so bad for those people out there that have lost everything and no time to get out to even grab your very precious essentials. So my heart goes out to you. And if you guys are in shock, you may need a dose of aconite. If you're crying endlessly, you may need some magnesia. But please see a homeopath or at least try those two remedies to see if it can help you. I feel so deeply for any of you out there that have experienced any loss during this disaster. Man, it's been a hard month. Every single disaster in the last month has touched my family. So I'm sending love and prayers to Santa Rosa, Napa Valley, and Sonoma Valley. So sad, these fires, but we've had this really big heat wave. And whenever you get high heat, something happens. And although they're not sure why the fire started there, they're thinking that it's electrical wires that have this arc ability and then they touch each other. But man, this is the biggest and most devastating fire in California history. So I'm sending love your way to everyone out there who lives in that area. And please wear a mask and protect your lungs because even here in LA, the air's not that good. And there's a lot more to it than just breathing smoke because when the trees burn, they spew more mercury into the air. It's horrible, all the toxins that they're using in chemicals to put the fire out. I mean, there's much more to be considering here than just smoke. So please wear a mask and stay indoors or filter your air wherever you can. We need clean air, and these poor people around these fires are just breathing in so much pollution and smoke. So please take care of yourself, you guys. And the other thing I always think about is all the poor animals. Breaks my heart to think how many have died in these fires also. So anyway, I'm just sending a lot of love that way to all of you there. But one thing we have to realize is this is all an effect of climate change. We're in a climate crisis because we've just taken too much from our earth. We've destroyed our oceans. We've just overcooked the earth and the oceans, and we need to do something about it. And the people in charge at the top better get on it and realize that we still have some time, not much time, but some time to make a difference. So we need to take action now. We can't wait for our officials to do something. We need to each do our own part. And the single biggest thing you can do, as you've heard a million times on this show, is to eat a plant-based diet, an organic, whole foods, plant-based diet. And if you don't understand how that can affect our climate change, then you need to watch the movie Cowspiracy because it explains the whole thing. And the other movie you should watch is called Chasing Coral because that shows you what's going on in our oceans and how the heated up and cooked oceans are affecting our coral. That movie was just astounding, so please watch it. Okay, enough about that. I know it's a serious subject, but let's move on. So how are the rest of you out there doing? It's fall. That's my favorite season. The only problem this year is that it doesn't feel like fall because it's been 100, 99, 95 today. So, geez, let's get rid of this heat wave in this summer. I'm ready for fall. Are you? I'm looking forward to hot chocolate by the fire. I like the time change when the nights come early. That's my favorite time of year. I like wearing hats. I love fall clothing. So I'm looking forward to fall, but ours hasn't come yet. But for those of you in New York and on the East Coast, yours is there probably already, although I heard it was 80 in New York the other day. But anyway, if you have fall in your area, I'm jealous. All right. Today's episode is going to be an interesting one. We've talked about medical marijuana before, but Dr. Patel is from California, and she is going to talk about her clinical experience about using medical marijuana on her patients. She has an interesting story because she came across an ad that said, "Wanted medical marijuana doctor." And she said, I need to find out about that. And that led her on her path today. And it's so good to hear from doctors who are actually practicing and using this kind of medicine because clinical practice is so different than just reading about scientific facts about some herb and what it does. So I think you're going to love this one today. And one of the main reasons that I decided to do another show on medical marijuana because I really wanted to talk to someone about the idea of pesticides and contamination in our cannabis plants because states like California, who just legalized marijuana, along with Colorado, Oregon, and Washington, which already has legalized marijuana, that means the access to marijuana is now so easy. And what if all these plants are completely toxic with pesticides? What are we going to do? I believe this is a huge problem, so I wanted an opportunity to talk with someone who uses it, and Dr. Patel was very interested in this subject. So we had a nice chat about this, and I got to have her opinion on that. But my belief is we really do need to establish some kind of organic certification. And that doesn't guarantee that there aren't going to be any toxic heavy metals in there because it's just like our food. We can buy organic food and it could be filled with lead and mercury. That's so sad. That's really the next certification we need. We need someone to tell us what metals are in our food. But now let's get back to the cannabis plants because I think this is a big problem. If we have easy access to marijuana, and we don't have any way of knowing if they're filled with pesticides and fungicides, we're in big trouble because these kind of chemicals are neurotoxins and we're being bombarded with neurotoxins from everywhere. So we really have to do something to monitor this industry because it's a huge growing field. Now look, marijuana is a medical herb and it has amazing healing properties. But if you're inhaling something, eating it, however you're going to take it, even putting ointment on your skin, and it's filled with toxic chemicals that are neurotoxins, really you're doing more harm than good. So I really hope that very soon we can establish some kind of organic growing certification so at least people aren't getting more sick by trying to get well. And the other thing I wanted to talk to Dr. Patel about was the idea that now marijuana is legal in California, Washington, Oregon, and Colorado. I just was curious about what she thought about this because people won't be going to doctors for prescriptions anymore, and they're just going to walk into these shops and buy what they think they need, take the dose that they think they need, and to me, that's high risk. There's certain chemicals that we need to take from that plant depending on our disease. So some people would need CBD, some people would need THC. But if you don't know what you need and you don't know what dose you need, to me, that's treating yourself at a really high risk. So I was curious to see how she thought that was going to affect the medical world and just people's health in general. Well, you guys, I hope you like this show. I think it's an easy one and an educational one, and hopefully it'll give some of you out there just another tool for your wellness toolbox. Okay, so sit back, relax, work out, drive, hopefully not in traffic, but if so, now you have the Vidal Speaks podcast to listen to, so it shouldn't be too bad. All right, you guys know the routine. Now, before we meet Dr. Patel, I'm going to tell you a little bit about her. Dr. Rachna Patel has been practicing in the area of medical marijuana for half a decade now, since 2012. She step-by-step walks patients through how to use medical marijuana for their specific medical condition without getting high off of it, without getting addicted to it, and without smoking it. She speaks from the experience of having treated thousands of patients and having thoroughly reviewed the medical research on marijuana. She completed her medical studies at Touro University College of Osteopathic Medicine in Vallejo, California, and her undergraduate studies at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. You can learn more about her work at her website, which is drrachnapatel.com. You'll find that link in the show notes. And by the way, you guys, if you have any questions and you want to reach out to her, you can do so by contacting her via her website or her YouTube channel, which both will be in the show notes also. Okay, you ready? So let's go talk to Dr. Patel now. Hi, Dr. Patel. Thanks so much for joining me today on the Vidal Speaks podcast. And I so look forward to chatting with you about your work using medical cannabis. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
All right, now before we get started, I always like to know a little bit more about the person. So I want to know about your path, of course, how you got to use medical cannabis or marijuana. But before that, I read that you went to Touro University, and I have a nephew there. He's at the Touro University in Las Vegas, which is where I grew up.
Yeah.
But on your bio, it said something about California. So is that where it used to be? Tell me about the school there and your training there.
So actually, originally, I'm a Jersey girl at heart. I was born and raised in Jersey, and I made my way out to California for medical school. And once you get bitten by the California bug, you sort of never leave.
Yeah.
I had to leave for training, not by choice, but eventually I made my way back here. But yeah, that's where I went to medical school, Touro University in California. And actually, the year that I started was the first year that they also started their first class in the Henderson, Nevada campus.
Ah,
yeah.
Cool. Neat. Yeah, it's a great school. I know it has a really good reputation. Now, I'm wondering, when you went to school there, did you learn anything about medical cannabis or any other alternative methods for healing in your training there?
So that's interesting. Not specifically about marijuana, but it is an osteopathic medical school. And so what we did learn was what's known as osteopathic medicine, which is basically, to put it in one word, it's learning adjustments of the skeletal and muscular system. Because there's this whole belief that the body is a unit, that what happens to the organs inside manifests in your muscular and in your skeletal system. So there was a sort of I would call it a holistic approach to medicine, but it didn't go so far as to incorporate marijuana into the curriculum.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Well, maybe one day it will, because things are changing. And I know, my dad's a medical doctor. He was an ophthalmologist. He is. I mean, he's retired. But Evan, my nephew, who's at Touro University right now, I'm so happy that he got into osteopathic medical school, because they do have a more natural view and a kind of whole picture medicine view of the person. And I think, sooner or later, they will learn more and more alternative things. I'm a homeopath, and it'd be nice, to come out of medical school and see doctors learning a little bit about all these things so they can end up specializing in any of these areas. But I understand totally what you're saying, that because they have this more holistic view, they're more open or able to go on that path sooner than, say, a really traditionally trained doctor where they don't get any idea really that the body's all one or a whole. So that's cool that you went there. But now what's your path from graduating from school to getting to begin to use medical marijuana?
Yeah, so my background is actually in emergency medicine. And while I was training in emergency medicine, here's what I found. I mean, really going back a little bit further, I went into medicine because I wanted to do some good, leave this earth having done some good for the others in this world. And so what happened was that as I was going through training, what I was finding was that, on the one hand, I was giving out prescriptions for pain management. But on the other hand, there were patients coming in complaining of side effects from these medications. A lot of them would come in what's called drug seeking. They had become addicted to these medications. So they were coming into the emergency room for their fix. Then I was in the unfortunate circumstance of having to resuscitate patients who had overdosed on these medications. So really, taking a step back, I wasn't solving a problem. I was creating more problems. So that really sat heavy with me because it's like, okay, I can't spend the rest of my life clocking in and clocking out doing this. And at the end, not really fulfill my ultimate purpose, because then all this hard work sort of goes to waste.
Right. I mean, if you believe you're put on this earth to fulfill a path that you need to do, and then suddenly you've just gone through the school and you're starting your practice and you feel like now you're contributing to the problem, that's a bit of a conflict.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. And it really does sit heavy with you, because then, you wake up in the morning feeling like, okay, you're not pumped for the day, ready to go, out to save lives. You wake up with a lot of doubt, and it makes it harder to get out of bed in the morning. But, at that time, what happened was that I was pretty much an insomniac throughout residency, because I worked so many hours, 80 to 100 hours on average per week. And so you get wired. It's difficult to then fall asleep. So, a lot of times I would have sleepless nights. You're tired. And so it's hard to be productive during that time. So, end up doing like mindless things like surfing the internet. And so one day I was surfing Craigslist, and I happened to click on the section that said health and medical, just out of curiosity. And that's when I came across an ad that said medical marijuana doctor needed. And before that moment in time, I had never known that the field had even existed. And so that's what got the ball rolling. I started to really look into the field and then also dive deep into the research behind medical marijuana. And where I was compelled was for its use for chronic pain management. It seemed like at that point it was, and still is, a much better option than what I was prescribing to patients. So a year later, after having done the research, really to become a great doctor, you need to have clinical experience. And you need to see how medicine plays out clinically, because the research can say one thing, but what happens in reality could be something very different. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
That's
so I
true.
needed to gain clinical experience. So I signed up to work at a medical marijuana clinic. And this was back in 2012. And now I've been in the field for half a decade now.
Wow. And how was that first year of working there? You must have learned a lot.
Yes, learned a ton, right? So, and actually, here's what I went in expecting. I had read a study that said that patients who took opioids, so medications such as, if your audience doesn't know, Lortab, Vicodin, OxyContin, Percocet, just to name a few, if they took those medications along with medical marijuana, what they found was that these patients were able to lower their doses of the opioids along with the use of the medical marijuana. And that's what I went in expecting. But what I found was that a lot of my patients were coming off of the pharmaceutical medications and just using medical marijuana to help manage their pain. And in addition, I found that it was tremendously helpful for patients who had, for instance, multiple sclerosis, who had Parkinson's disease, So wide variety of conditions that at that point I hadn't even read about in the research.
Now, let's say like in Parkinson's patients, the ones that you saw there, that's different than, say, pain, or was it managing the pain from their disease, or was it managing the tremors, it does so many things, and we'll get into that, but I'm just curious, in that first year when you would see people with Parkinson's, how would it help them?
So the main way that, specifically with Parkinson's disease, the main way that medical marijuana helps is with tremors. A lot of times tremors can turn into muscle rigidity. And so what it does is that it helps in a couple ways with the tremors. For a lot of patients, it helps you reduce the frequency of the tremors. For a lot of patients, it helps you reduce the duration of the tremors. And then for a lot of patients, it reduces the severity of the tremors. So the tremors don't turn into muscle rigidity or stiffness.
So did you see a lot of that when in your first year in that clinic, or did you see more like back pain and injury pains?
So the most common conditions that I saw and I still see are chronic pain, anxiety, and insomnia. So Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, all of that falls within the category of chronic pain. More common, though, within the category of chronic pain, the conditions that I was treating often were arthritis, fibromyalgia, migraines, a lot of back pain. So those are the more common conditions that I ended up treating.
Mm-hmm. And people who had these common pain conditions, were they always managing, or did you see them be able to come off of also medical marijuana? Like, did it ever heal them, or is it more a management tool?
It's more of a symptom management tool. It doesn't actually get to the root of the problem. And that's actually something important to make clear to people, that it doesn't actually, cure the disease.
And that's why we have homeopaths and osteopaths and people who do natural medicine to help get to the root of the problem. But what a fantastic tool, because you still need this kind of thing in the world today. And being an ER doctor, my gosh, that is what you're seeing every day, every minute of your emergency medical practice is someone in pain.
Yeah, pain is what you commonly see in the emergency room.
And it's what a great tool to have to feel like you can give them something that's not just the typical prescription that you're worried in 1 week they're going to be addicted. So that must have been like such a breakthrough for you.
Basically, it started me on a mission to really change the face of medicine so that we're not prescribing so many medications that have side effects, that are causing addiction, that are lethal, and instead use medical marijuana, which has a much better safety profile, in place of these medications, right? And so a lot of the medications that I'm referring to are medications that are very commonly prescribed for chronic pain, for anxiety, for insomnia. They could very easily be replaced with medical marijuana as a much safer alternative. So that's the goal at this point, is to help move things forward with the knowledge that I have and the experience that I have. And I'm leveraging technology to do that, at this point.
Right. And you said one of the conditions you treat is insomnia. Wow, that's become so huge today. I still wonder why so many people can't sleep. It's really a crisis. And I'd like to know about how, people you've prescribed, what were they using before? Because those kind of drugs are really horrendous side effects.
Yeah, so in terms of prescription medications, the most commonly prescribed medication for insomnia is Ambien.
So I know people who've become mentally like almost stupid from that drug.
Yeah, it causes sleepwalking. That's one of the more common side effects. And so I've had patients come in and tell me that, Dr. Patel, in the middle of the night, I got into my car and was about to drive off. And if it wasn't for my significant other, for my spouse stopping me, God knows what would have happened. So it is a fairly risky medication to take, especially if you start experiencing that side effect. And then over the counter, a lot of patients will take, like Unisom, for instance, which is basically another version of like Benadryl, an anti-allergy medication that just makes you really, really sedated. And what happens with these medications is that a lot of patients will complain that, I'll sleep, but I wake up really groggy in the morning, and it affects my productivity through the next day. And that's what we really want to avoid, right? So I want patients to take medications where it's helping to resolve their medical issue, but it's not affecting the quality of their life or their ability to function. And medical marijuana can be taken in such a way where it's, helping to resolve your issue, but it's not impacting your everyday activities.
So in general then, because you see a big range of things and conditions, what kind of results do you get?
Yeah, so let's see, we can do this condition by condition. So with chronic pain, like I mentioned before, in terms of prescription medication specifically, I have patients that are able to lower their doses of prescription medications, and then there's some that are able to come off of their prescription medications completely. Those are the two more common scenarios. And then there are fewer cases where the patients can have to continue to take their prescription medications, but they use marijuana in addition to it, and it helps to better manage their pain. And typically, in terms of levels of pain, for patients that are in severe pain, the pain comes down to mild levels. So, if your pain starts off as unbearable, it can get down to a more manageable level. It always depends on where you start, right? So if it's mild to moderate pain, the marijuana can certainly eliminate it. But if it's more severe pain, then it brings it down to more mild levels. When it comes to anxiety, I have patients telling me, one, that for the patients that have anxiety attacks, it helps to reduce the number of anxiety attacks that they have. And also, it almost increases the threshold. So certain situations that would typically trigger their anxiety attacks, they're more comfortable. And so for example, social situations. For a lot of people, being in social situations, it tends to trigger that anxiety. But, about a year later after treatment, patients will come in saying that, I feel more comfortable in social situations now. And for people who have just generalized anxiety, who don't get panic attacks, patients will say, I feel more calm, more relaxed when I use the medical marijuana. So, and the other thing is that marijuana doesn't have to be taken on an everyday basis. It really, ultimately, it's an as-needed medication. So you can come off, get on it and come off of it really as needed.
That's what's so nice because of that. You can use it, especially in cases like insomnia or anxiety. You may not need it every day. You may need it once a month or once a week or whatever, in a crisis. And it's a great option to have. But since a lot of what you do is use it for pain management along with these, because a lot of chronic diseases eventually get to a point where there's pain. So I'm curious, I don't know if you saw, but last night on 60 Minutes, there was a special about the opioid epidemic. Did you happen to see it?
No. I don't watch television anymore.
I know. I don't either, but someone had told me this was going to be on, and I really wanted to talk about this on my show because it's such a huge problem in our country for sure. I'm sure all over the world, but in our country, it's a huge problem. And it was it's kind of really sad because, first of all, it showed how corrupt sadly, that our agencies that are supposed to be protecting us. And it had these little towns of 5,000 people, and they were receiving 9 million pills a month of opioids because they were they're basically like legalized drug pushers, because it's a billion dollar business. And it's just so sad to see. And so they had this investigation. The guy that was on was a person that was in charge of the investigation, and he had it right to the point where they were going to put some of the big people doing this in jail. It's really sad, but the attorneys flipped, they call it, went through the revolving door, meaning they went to the other side because they got offered a huge amount of money, and they became the attorneys for the other side, and now they know all the little facts and ins and out of everything. And they got some bill passed in Congress that stopped them from being able to go to jail, and as a matter of fact, stopped them from stopping any large shipments of opioids to these kind of places until they were further investigated. So now it just goes through and there's nothing they can do about it. So it's really sad. It made me understand why the problem is so huge in our country. And as you said, there's so many side effects. And one of the horrible side effects is that you just need more and more and more, and you can't stop. And there's thousands and thousands of deaths every day due to these kind of drugs. So I'm so happy that people are using a God-given herb like marijuana to help people with pain and in these conditions. It's really needed. And I've talked to two other experts on my show. One was Rick Simpson. And one of the benefits he said of medical use of marijuana is that it actually can get people off the addiction to these kind of drugs and any other drugs like heroin and other drugs by using medical marijuana. He's seen the ability for their addictions to go away. And so that's probably why you were seeing them be able to reduce some of their pain meds too, right?
Yeah. So scientifically, what's going on is that marijuana enhances the effect of opioids.
Mm-hmm.
So you need less of it. We don't know exactly biochemically how, but we do know that it enhances the effect of it. So a smaller dose will have a greater effect on your body, and so you'll need less of it. So essentially, that's what's going on.
Do you know how it relieves pain, or is it just that it puts your mind in a state that you don't feel it, or does it have some property that it actually relieves the pain?
Yeah, so a couple different ways. So the first is that it modulates the pain pathways. So let me sort of put this in non-scientific terms. So basically, think of it as having some troops, detecting troops that are kind of all over our body, and their job is to detect pain. So anytime they detect pain, they send signals off to the brain, which is the command center. And then the command center then decides what to do, and then sends out outgoing signals to let the body know, hey, this is what you need to do to help reduce the pain. So let me give you an example. Say your hand is next to something really, really hot. So these troops, these detecting troops will send signals to the brain that, hey, the hand is next to something really, really hot. And the brain's like, okay, well, we need to get that hand away from the source of heat. So it'll send over signals to, certain muscles that then know how to move the hand away from the source of heat. Now, what's going on with marijuana is that they've noticed that through research that in animal models that any animal that's in pain has a greater number of receptors for the chemicals in marijuana. And the reason we have these receptors in the first place is because we make chemicals that are very similar to those in the marijuana plant.
And are you speaking about the cannabinoids?
Yeah, so the cannabinoid. Yes, there are endocannabinoids, which is what we make, and then there's phytocannabinoids, which is what the plant makes. And then we have cannabinoid receptors, right? So basically, animals in pain tend to have more cannabinoid receptors, and these cannabinoid receptors interact with these detecting troops, and it dampens the signals that go to the brain. So it dampens the pain signals that go to the brain. So that's one way. Now, the second way is that marijuana modulates the immune system. So this is where its role in its anti-inflammatory effect comes into play. It affects the specific cells of the immune system to basically dampen the inflammatory response, just generally. Now, the third thing is that it impacts the emotional processing of pain. So what I mean by this is that there's two components to pain. There's a physical component, and then there's the emotional interpretation of pain. So physical component is, your brain saying, okay, this is what hurts. But the emotional component of it is saying, this feels really bad. And so what they found marijuana does is that it weakens the signal between those two, the physical and the emotional components of pain. And so you know that the pain is there, but a lot of my patients will tell me, oh, you know what, Dr. Patel, I feel the pain sometimes, but it doesn't bother me as much. Mm-hmm. So there you go. It's impacting the emotional processing of the pain. So those are the main ways that we know that marijuana has an impact on helping to reduce pain.
Well, and it's interesting that it has like an anti-pain property to it, but also an anti-inflammation. Do you know if it has any antibacterial or antiviral properties?
Not that I found. In patients that have had viral infections or bacterial infections, they really sort of need to turn to the big guns, which are the antibiotics and the antivirals.
Mm-hmm. And in the anti-inflammatory mode, has that worked with things like rheumatoid arthritis or something that's chronic and can move around?
Yeah. So it's the common inflammatory conditions, autoimmune conditions that I treat are rheumatoid arthritis, like you mentioned, psoriasis, Crohn's disease. And what it does is that it helps to reduce the symptoms that these patients are experiencing. So in the case of psoriasis, for instance, these patients get basically they get plaques on their skin, and the underlying skin turns really red and it starts to flake. And so when my patients apply marijuana to the affected areas, what they find is that the redness reduces, if there's any swelling, that reduces, and the flakiness reduces as well.
Okay, we know there's THC and CBD, and I'm curious, do you use CBD only or both?
It depends on the medical condition. Some conditions benefit from CBD, some benefit from THC, and then there are those that benefit from both. So it's really going to come down to the medical condition or the combination of medical conditions that I'm treating.
Okay, and can you just, maybe because I'm interested in this myself, but I'm just curious, what kind of conditions would be good for CBD? What about TCH, and which ones have you used both for?
Yeah, so let's see. CBD, I found, tends to work well for like muscular conditions. So for instance, any patient who has multiple sclerosis and has spasticity, it's worked well for these patients. A combination of THC and CBD would work well for anybody who has an autoimmune condition like psoriasis, for example. And then THC works well in patients who have side effects like nausea and vomiting for when they're undergoing chemotherapy, when they've been diagnosed with cancer.
Mm-hmm. And that's the THC. And then what conditions would be good for both?
So yeah, like I mentioned, autoimmune conditions, right? So psoriasis as an example.
So you do both. And which way do you recommend your patients to take it?
So again, it depends on the condition, right? So when I talked about the psoriasis, what I was referring to is that these patients apply topicals. So marijuana comes in the form of an ointment, and so they apply it to the affected area on their skin. Someone with generalized spasticity, they would not benefit from the use of a topical. It would just not be an effective or an efficient means of delivery. So again, it comes down to the medical condition.
And what about when it's a condition that they need to get it internally? Are they doing it as a tea? Are they smoking it? Is there different options for the client? Because some people are really adverse to wanting to smoke it.
Yes, they have many different options. So in place of smoking it, patients can what's called vaporize it. And that's essentially you're heating the plant rather than burning it. And there's devices called vaporizers. I like to equate them to, if you can think of it as a handheld diffuser for an essential oil, that's essentially what you're using, and you are inhaling it through your mouth. So that's one option. Then there's edibles. Now, the most common edibles in states where marijuana has been legalized for recreational use, you'll find at dispensaries are, chocolates, gummies, not the healthiest of options. You'll find like cookies. There's even like popcorn, all sorts of things. But the industry is becoming more and more evolved day by day. So you will find gluten-free options, sugar-free options, vegan options as well. And then there's a sublingual formulation of marijuana. Basically, that means that it's a form of marijuana that you can apply under the tongue. So that's another option. And then, believe it or not, there's also rectal and vaginal formulations of marijuana as well. So,
and have you found any of these work faster or better or deeper than some of the others?
Again, it's going to depend on the medical condition, right? So They all work differently. They all work differently in general in terms of how long it takes for them to take effect and overall how long the effect lasts.
So you kind of work with the patient, like if they tell you, I really don't want to vaporize it, even though you might think for their condition that will work best, then you can tell them what would be some next best options.
Yeah. Or if they have a lung condition like emphysema, asthma, something like that, then inhalation is, completely out of the question. And then we have to turn to other alternatives. So it's really going to depend on the medical condition and then, that the patient has.
So have you had any problems with patients that come to you and they're in pain, but they have a job that does drug testing? And if they have one of the conditions that needs TCH, because CBD, I think, wouldn't show up. I'm not sure. Maybe that's something you could tell me. But that's always been a problem. I feel sad about these patients that could lose their job if they do medical marijuana, if it tests in their urine.
Yeah, so I actually had an extensive conversation with an attorney about this, and it's actually recorded on my YouTube channel. So your audience can certainly, if they want to delve further into the topic, they can take a look at that video. But here's the thing, it's going to depend on the state in which you live. Some states have built-in protections into their medical marijuana program, others don't. So New Jersey, for instance, does have built-in protection. And basically, the way the attorney put it is that the burden of proof that the use of marijuana is interfering with the person's performance at work really falls on the employer to prove. This is actually surprisingly not the case in California. There are no built-in protections in California. So really you're at the mercy of the policy that your employer has in place. And, so if you do get drug tested on a regular basis, and the policy is that they don't tolerate anybody who uses medical marijuana, then, you're kind of out of luck, in that situation. So it's just going to depend on the employer's policy. If you're in a state where there's no built-in protections, there are a couple other states where I don't know them off the top of my head. I think New York might be one of them. But look at that video. I know there's definitely a couple states where there are built-in protections. Like I said, the burden of proof sort of falls on the employer to actually prove that, hey, the use of this is actually interfering with the person's performance. There's a big case in Colorado. I don't know if you heard of it. But there was a guy who I believe had multiple sclerosis, and he was using medical marijuana at home, not even at work, but he was working for Comcast. And it went through a couple levels of appeals, and final decision was that it's really ultimately up to the employer in the state of Colorado to determine.
Wow.
Yeah, even if it's for medical reasons. So,
gosh, we seem so far behind the times sometimes. We finally find something that can help people with a horrible disease like MS, and then this poor guy has to, basically lose his job because the company says we're not going to tolerate that. It seems so black and white. Don't people realize that there's a small area always where there's going to be exceptions? That's just terrible.
Yeah. And the thing is that you can use medical marijuana in such a way so that it doesn't, like I said, affect your ability to function. In fact, like I mentioned, there are prescription medications that can interfere with your ability to function, and actually even your ability to drive. With Ambien, for instance, if you're caught sort of you're driving off, and they find that you had Ambien in your system, that's reason to give you a DUI. So there are definitely prescription medications that can have a greater impact on a person's ability to function than medical marijuana can.
And do you think with Colorado legalizing marijuana that now more and more businesses would make medical uses of it more acceptable?
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing. When I first started my own practice in 2014, one of the ways that you establish your practice is that you go around to other doctors that are in complementary fields where, if there are cases that that you know where you can't solve a problem for the patient because you're not specialized enough in that area, you then refer out to that doctor, and then vice versa. So I could not get past the office manager whenever I went to these offices. I basically got the door slammed in my face. But now, fast forward 3 years, I'm now getting referrals from doctors at Stanford University that I've never even met before. So to answer your question, yeah, I feel like people are becoming more and more open to it. The medical community as a whole tends to be fairly conservative. They're certainly by no means early adapters.
Right.
so I think, a lot of law comes into place when it comes to things like employment. A lot of federal regulations come into place as well, where, the employer may be okay with it, but they have to abide by federal regulations.
Right.
And so they're caught between a rock and a hard place too, where, they may be okay with the fact that, if it's not affecting your ability to function, we're fine with it. But we have to abide by federal regulations. So, it's a lot of legalization that sort of kind of is standing as a barrier.
Time to take a little break and get a drink. Hopefully your favorite kombucha, or maybe some nice warm hot chocolate or warm ginger tea. You could try mixing cocoa powder and some ginger powder together. That's yummy. And for those of you that are out there in Europe or on the East Coast and experiencing fall, then I'm jealous because you can be sipping on one of those drinks while I'm drinking my cold kombucha here in my 95-degree day in California. Anyways, I want to tell you guys that if you aren't taking minerals, then you need to be taking ionic minerals. Minerals are really important for the body. They're a must. And as you know, I recommend drinking distilled water because all other water, including reverse osmosis water and filtered water, they have nanomolecules of plastic in it. So I drink pure water, which is pure distilled water. And then I take my ionic minerals. And the best ionic minerals that I've found are Good State ionic minerals. You can find them if you go to my website and just go look in the shop button and scroll down and click on Good State, and it'll take you to their website and you can search around. But I love their minerals. I've been taking ionic minerals for a while now. It's really important to take ionic minerals and not regular minerals because our body can't absorb regular minerals. This morning when I was cleaning out my distiller and I had all the calcium deposit at the bottom of the distiller, I pulled out a big chunk of it and I showed Lloyd and I said, look, this is all the calcium just from this month of distilling water. And he was shocked. And I was thinking, yeah, that's the same calcium that our body's trying to absorb but can't. So then it just starts depositing it all over our arteries and joints. So check out ionic minerals, guys. They're the best, and Good State ionic minerals are the best of the best. Okay, and lastly, as you know, I'm just going to say thank you for using that Amazon banner. I so appreciate it. And for those of you out there that are new or who haven't done so, if you're not committed to using another site's Amazon banner, then I would love to invite you to go onto my website and click on the Amazon banner and then just bookmark it. And anytime you guys do any shopping through Amazon, they just kick me a little commission and it really helps. With holiday seasons around the corner, it can really help. So please, if you're not already using my Amazon banner, I encourage you to do so. All right, you guys, now let's get back to the show. Here we go. Well, and I think sometimes there's always people trying to use it who don't need it maybe. And, then they could say, well, I have insomnia. Well, how would the employer know? So there's always that, but still, it's so helpful to people with cancer pains and chronic deep diseases and all kinds of pain. I know so many people, even in my practice. I had a young boy, he was probably 16, and his mom had him on Paxil for For anxiety. And
For anxiety, yeah.
one of the side effects of it is that they lose their sex drive. And I mean, here's a kid who's like 17 or 18.
Yeah.
And he's just like so determined to get off of this medication. And so on his own, he started smoking pot, but his parents sometimes just can't accept that. And it really worked for him, but they couldn't accept that. So he was like really in a tough place. And now if you go get a job with a company that drug tests you, then you're really in trouble. And there's some ways that they're making it so available, but on a federal level, it's still a problem. Like, let's just talk about California here. Look, we legalized it. Isn't it this January that we're going to be legal now, right?
Yep. So starting January 2018, any licensed facility will be able to allow anyone over the age of 21 to just walk in without any documentation from a doctor. So, I think it's a situation where it's a lot like technology, where the laws haven't caught up with the advancements that we've made in society and as a whole. And so a lot of the old laws are still applied to modern day advances. And so it just doesn't make any sense.
And it's interesting because we can walk in a store and buy it, but it's still federally illegal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of, it's like, wow, you could still pretty much get in trouble, even though it's legal here, but you could still get in trouble. And what's your opinion of it being legalized in California, just to anybody?
Here's the thing. I see both sides to it. On the one hand, I know that for a lot of people, even going to a doctor, for them, in their mind, that's leaving a paper trail of their medical marijuana use, right? Even if they're using it medically, it's still leaving a paper trail. So that that may have stopped them from even turning to marijuana medically. But now that they can just walk into dispensary, there may be people out there who are now more comfortable at a legal level to use medical marijuana, for their conditions. So it sort of opens them up more. But on the other hand, there are certainly groups of patients that should be using marijuana with great caution because it can exacerbate certain conditions. So, for example, I mentioned the lung conditions, right? Anybody who's inhaling marijuana, it can exacerbate their lung conditions. Anybody who has a heart condition, excess amounts of marijuana can increase your heart rate. So if you have an underlying heart condition, it can certainly exacerbate it. And then there are patients anybody who's had a history of visual or auditory hallucinations or psychotic episodes, really, really high amounts of marijuana can cause visual and auditory hallucinations and can throw somebody into these psychotic episodes. And then there's, women that are breastfeeding, women that are pregnant or who plan to become pregnant. I generally err on the side of caution and recommend that they don't use marijuana because we don't know. The jury's sort of out when it comes to the effect on a growing fetus on a growing baby. So I err on the side of caution. And then there's children. Whether it's intentional overdose from the parent, say the child has a condition and the parent is the one administering the marijuana, or the child, accidentally overdoses on a chocolate bar thinking that it's chocolate when it's actually medicated with marijuana. There have been cases where these kids have shown up in a comatose state in the emergency room. So yes, we've opened up these dispensaries to anyone over the age of 21, but what cannot be controlled is how much the person is taking. And then what effect it can have on them. So there's really a twofold, twofold perspective that I have. I mean, ultimately, my perspective as a physician is that marijuana should be used safely and appropriately.
Right. Well, see, this is kind of one of the problems is because you've basically allowed people to not need a prescription and to basically decide for themselves what kind, how much, and what they should do with it. And so now they're kind of going on their own, which is I think, it's still a medicine. It's a very potent herb. And just,
Mhm.
I know other herbs. I mean, there's contraindications with certain things. You just need to know about the toxicities of them. And in your case, like you're talking about, some conditions need CBD and others need both or THC. And if you don't know this, then you're treating yourself. And to me, that's a risk.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And, a lot of my patients will come in saying that, they're coming in because they want to avoid the experience that they had back in high school or college, which is that, a lot of them, they used it and they got high off of it. Most of the time, most of these patients have smoked marijuana and they don't want to smoke it. So that's the main reason that they're coming to me is that, hey, teach me how to use this. I only want the medical benefits of it. And how do I use it so I don't have that same experience that I had in high school, and that so that I don't have to smoke it. So yeah, I agree with you. There is a certain way to use it. And a lot of it has to do with dosing. So basic concept, and as a homeopath, you're probably familiar with this concept, but every medication has a dosing range, right? So there's a dosing range where it's too little and it's not doing anything for you. But there's a dosing range where it's too much and now you're having side effects. But then in between these dosing ranges, you have your sweet spot, your therapeutic dosing range. And that's where you're getting the medical benefits, but you're not getting the side effects. And that's really the range you want to hit with any medication, but also with medical marijuana. And typically to hit this range, you need to have knowledge as to how the medication works in the body to be able to adjust it, accordingly.
Yeah, otherwise they go and they try it and they say, oh, I tried medical marijuana, it didn't work, or I tried it and I was high all day, I couldn't function. But they didn't use an expert to help guide them, or a practitioner or a doctor that knows what they're doing from years and years of treating lots of different kinds of diseases and patients. Because that's where clinical experience is invaluable to help, guide the person with the disease along, or the management of their pain. And I feel it's really a pity. So I feel like I'm a bit torn about it. And the other part for me is there's this other group that just now doesn't have any medical issues and can go into these stores and just kind of be high all day and just avoid life. And I'm not excited about that. But then I think we allow alcohol, and I think that's a horrible situation too, because you can go in and you could drink all day at home or whatever. So in a way, I don't see it much differently. And if people want to do that, then so be it. But I see the downside to that, that's for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with you.
I don't know. I wonder sometimes with Colorado, I lived in Boulder, and I wonder how it's so different now, because I'm talking about the population now that isn't sick or have pain, that's just using it daily for feeling good and being high. And that worries me over long-term effect of why, I don't know. I just don't believe that people should have to need something like that to be happy. They're covering something up. They're escaping life.
Yes. Yeah, totally agree with you there.
Now it's going to be interesting with this legalization starting in January, how our culture changes here.
Yeah, we'll have to see, how it plays out, and how it plays out in one of the most, the highly populated state in all of America.
Yeah, exactly. And with a very large population and very open-minded people. And so it's really going to be interesting to see what happens. I know you're from India, I think, right? Are they using medical cannabis in India?
I'm not sure, actually. The only thing that I know of, you're talking to someone who's incredibly whitewashed. So I'm not in touch with my culture. But from what I know, I think it's illegal there. But there's one day, it's called Holi, which is a festival of colors. And that is the one day where it's legal to use. And they make what's called bhang, which is basically the chemicals in marijuana extracted in, I think they use half and half or heavy cream or something like that. And they make a drink out of it. So I think I don't know how much it's enforced, even though it's illegal. But I know that that's the one day where I think it has to do with like maybe some goes back to something religious. I'm not sure actually, but I do know that it's associated for that one day. It's not deemed illegal.
Because I know there are a lot of countries that are still banning it and a lot of countries that are open to it. But the next subject I really want to talk to you about is just the quality of the cannabis and the medical marijuana plants, or just let's just say marijuana in general, the quality of the plants that are grown today. So this is kind of a two-part question. I'd like to know, where do you recommend your patients buy their cannabis from? But then also, let's talk a little bit about the quality of plants being grown, because I worry about pesticides and all the environmental toxins and things like this that are in the plants.
Yeah, so pesticides, fungicides, rodenticides have become a big issue when it comes to marijuana because the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is not involved in any way. Right? So there's no they usually make a list of what's allowed in terms of pesticides, fungicides, rodenticides, and what's not allowed for certain plants. And then, they give you cutoffs as in terms of residue, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, but they're not involved in any way. And in any state where marijuana is legalized for medical use, there's really not much in the way of regulation when it comes to this particular area. Mm-hmm. Now, in states where marijuana has been legalized for recreational use, they're finding out sort of after the fact that this is an issue, and now they're taking steps towards regulation. Mm-hmm. I know in Colorado there was a big recall there have been multiple recalls actually of products and of plants where the pesticide levels were found to be really, really high. A lot of these pesticides are neurotoxic. They can cause brain injuries. Yep. They can, make you increase your likelihood of getting Parkinson's. So it does pose a threat to the consumer's health. Now there is, I think what's going on in terms of regulation, and Colorado sort of leads the way, is that they're starting to do testing for amounts of pesticides and fungicides that are in the products. And if it's above, any sort of cutoff, then the product is sort of recalled. But this is all sort of, it's all recent within the past, 1 to 2 years.
Imagine the people smoking it before that.
Yeah. So I know there's a pesticide called Eagle 20. That was a big deal. There was, issue about that. So basically what I typically tell my patients is that make sure whatever you buy is laboratory tested, and also make sure it's tested for things like pesticides and fungicides and levels and whatnot.
Yeah. And are there certain shops that do all the laboratory testing and can give you the sheet on the product?
Yeah. So in states where marijuana has been legalized for recreational use, laboratory testing is generally mandated. So starting in California, starting January of 2018, laboratory testing will be mandated. And I know that in California, it's called the Department of Pesticide Regulation. I know they've made a statement that the regulatory body for cannabis is implementing regulations when it comes to testing for pesticides and fungicides and coming up with a list of what's allowed and what's not allowed sort of thing. I know Oregon is doing the same thing. So it's more of a work in progress than anything else. Yeah. Really, the way to protect yourself is to make sure it's laboratory tested. Now, I do want to touch on this fact of something in the cannabis industry being called organic.
Okay.
It's not third party labeled organic, like by the USDA. It's really just someone, on their own deciding to call their product organic. It hasn't necessarily been, there's no sort of criteria in place to define something as organic in the cannabis industry. So really, there's no such thing as third-party certified organic in the marijuana industry.
Sounds like they need to get that, though, or even USDA, whatever it is, but it sounds like they need to get some kind of certification to make some products organic, because it's a really scary problem.
Yes. No, I agree with you. And I think the states, like I said, in the states where marijuana has been legalized for recreational use, Colorado, Washington, and Oregon particularly, have been taking steps to protect consumers.
Mm-hmm.
Other states where it's been legalized for medical use, I don't know what kind of steps they're taking to protect the consumers, but I know that it is an issue because a lot of times, either ingesting or inhaling and any of the residues that are left behind can be harmful to a patient's health.
There was a gentleman here in California who had some chronic condition like MS or something like this, and someone had told him about medical marijuana, so he went and he got some, and then he became like something really strange with his brain, like really bad symptoms and stuff. So anyway, he took the product to a lab and had it tested, and it had some, I think it was a pesticide, but it was one of these ones that really people use to like commit suicide or something. It was like really a horrible thing that was in it. And so this lab company kind of undercover went around to 40 or 50 shops and bought all these different products from all these different shops and asked them, like, is this pesticide free? Or, and they'd, oh, no, it's all natural. And they took all, let's just say there were 60 products they took from like 50 different shops. They took it back to their lab and they tested, and every single one of them except 2 had levels of not only this horrible stuff, but all kinds of pesticides and stuff. So after I read that, I'm thinking, wow, and so many people that don't even need it are smoking every day, and they're just getting like completely, like you said, they can bring on diseases and stuff. So I think that's where we're really at the infancy. Like, yes, it's an amazing God-given herb that has invaluable medicinal qualities to it, but this plant is one that pulls things from the soil, even heavy metals from the soil. That's how they've cleaned land in regions where there was radiation fallout and stuff. They'd plant a bunch of the hemp plants and it would pull out. So you need to know what you're doing and what you're putting on it, because if you're smoking the leaf of something that you're spraying with a pesticide, that's just a scary thought, because you're kind of creating something more than what you're fixing. So I hope that's what I hope, is that the future. I'm glad to hear you say that California legalizing it in January will at least now make them to provide some laboratory sheets with what's in it. So that's a positive for sure.
Yeah, and they're going to have very specific labeling and whatnot, which is the case in Oregon and in Washington as well.
And it's going to get there. You just you see it coming. I don't know how many years out, but there's going to be a movement for very organic and organic certification and very clean. I'm sure it will get there, because we're getting there with food, and because of the problem with our regular food. So now we have this way of certifying organic and buying from local farmers who are very aware about how to grow. And so hopefully it'll get there too with medical marijuana.
Yeah. But I think, we've started to make progress, which is great, but we certainly have a long way to go.
For sure. And before we go, I'd like you to just tell people like where you practice, where your office is, and how they can follow you. Do you do any social media stuff? You said you have a YouTube channel, so tell us what that is.
Yeah, so if your audience members have questions for me, the easiest way to reach me is on my YouTube channel. They can just leave a comment or post their question in the comment section. And typically I'm either replying to the comments or I'm posting videos that help to answer these questions. So that's how I usually engage with people publicly. I also have a practice, but I'm actually transitioning to a online practice starting 2018, just because I've had people reach out to me from basically all over the world wanting to work with me. So that's what I'm doing. My practice is local out in Walnut Creek, California, in the Bay Area. But I'm transitioning out to a online practice starting 2018. So basically what I've done is that I'm creating protocols. I've finished a couple of them by medical condition. And basically it's video recorded. So folks, it's a video recording of me speaking over some PowerPoint presentations and walking people through step by step how to use medical marijuana for their specific conditions. But then, if they have further questions, they can always reach out to me, because as a part of this, consultations are also included.
Cool. Very nice. Great. And what is your YouTube channel?
YouTube channel, you can just Google the medical marijuana expert YouTube, and I'll come up on the first page of.
Great. Well, Dr. Patel, this has been really nice to chat with you, and I'm happy to see that you started your path feeling bad about giving people pain meds because you realized it wasn't really helping them as much as contributing to a bigger problem. And now you're doing such good work to help so many people at least find a more natural way for their symptom management. And so I thank you for your work, and it's been really a pleasure to talk to you today. So thanks for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to sort of spread my message. So I appreciate that.
Okay, we'll be in touch soon.
Yep, have a great day.
So how was that one? Did you learn something from Dr. Patel? I love that she was willing to have that conversation with me about pesticides and marijuana. And obviously, she's very concerned about that too. As a doctor who's using medical marijuana, it's really an important issue. And I was really happy to hear that starting January of 18, when it's legal for us to buy marijuana in California anyway, that they'll now have to have laboratory sheets with every purchase. So that's great news. And the other thing I love, because she's an osteopath, so she knows about the whole body healing. And I really love that when I asked her if she's seen anybody really get rid of their symptoms by using medical marijuana, or if it's really just a symptom management tool. And she said it was just a symptom management tool. So I really appreciate that honesty, because that makes a difference. But hey, look, sometimes that's the best medicine of all. When somebody can't get well and they've tried everything and they have pain, imagine what a great miracle this could be for somebody to get off of their opioids and to be able to use medical marijuana instead for pain. That's truly a miracle. But what I always want to tell you guys is that you need to first try to treat your disease at its root cause. And only when you can't find any way to treat it at its root cause, then you go to symptom management like this. And deeper conditions of anxiety and insomnia, like she was talking about, and even autoimmune diseases. Many of these have been helped by homeopathy, along with so many other natural methods. Acupuncture has helped a lot of people. But my point is that if you're taking medical marijuana for your anxiety, or you're taking it for sleep, or you're taking it for an autoimmune disease, and you have not tried to get rid of your disease from a deeper cause and by using a natural method like homeopathy, I just urge you to try it, because there's a lot of success with homeopathy and autoimmune diseases and anxiety and insomnia and all these kinds of things. It's worth a try. What do you have to lose? And if you've already tried to treat your disease on a deeper cause and you haven't found any success, then this is a great option. But I suggest you get someone like Dr. Patel to help you with dosing and management using medical cannabis, and you should not take the chance of treating yourself with this. Cannabis or medical marijuana is very powerful medicine, and we need to take this seriously. It's not just a be happy drug for fun. This is really a serious possible future medicine for our culture. And I believe we need to have available a very clean, organic version of cannabis or medical marijuana so that we truly can use it for powerful medicine. But until that time comes, take Dr. Patel's advice and make sure the only kind of cannabis you're buying is one that has a lab sheet with it that tells you that it's been tested for pesticides and fungicides. All right, you guys, on that note, I'm going to say goodbye. I know that you know what time it is now, right? Yep, it's time to say goodbye. So until next Wednesday, eat lots of plants, be vegan, and love life. Ta-ta for now. Vidal has spoken. Remember, you heal with a plant-powered diet, homeopathy, and detoxing. Of course. Peace. Be healthy. Be free. Live life.